Hello, this is Lindy. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads and another edition of Friday Reads. In the past week, I've finished 8 books and bailed on one. But before I get to those, I'll just tell you a bit about what's been going on in my busy week. We have been dog sitting. So our own puppy turned 6 months old. That's Joni. I'll pop in a photo of her. So we've also been looking after her mother, Nikika, who looks a lot like Joni, just a slightly bigger version, and her brother, one of her brothers, Reynard, who's a brown, foxy-looking guy. And I have a clip of the 3 of them play fighting. Actually, I think mother and sister are ganging up on brother in this video clip that I'll include at the end if you care to wait till then. And I have also made a little short clip of my back garden and what's blooming now. Been doing a lot of work in the garden, so that's also at the end for those of you who like to hang in there. I did hang out at the University of Alberta Botanic Garden on Thursday for most of the day. I had a table where I had been invited to talk about natural dyes, and so that was actually quite fun for me, talking to people about a subject I'm passionate about. And 2 of the people who showed up came especially because they know me from Instagram, and I'd never met them before. So I felt a little bit like a star. It was kind of cool. Yeah, it was a great day. And I had 3 book clubs in the past week. And one of those was a book club that's new to me. It's not like I need more book clubs, but I saw that the Glass Bookshop, a local independent bookstore in Edmonton, their monthly book discussion is about Buffalo is the New Buffalo by Chelsea Vowell. I adore this book. I think this one has really good potential of winning the Gilpeer Prize this year. The best one of the eligible books that I've read so far anyway in my Shadow Gilpeer project. It was also really exciting to go to an in-person book club, which I haven't done since the COVID pandemic started. The facilitator was excellent. Her name is Magda Mulatu, and she is the events and media manager or something like that for the Glass Bookshop. Having a good facilitator makes a big difference for a good book discussion, especially if it's people that don't all know each other, that don't meet regularly. Maybe these people do, but it was the first time for me being there. And also with short stories, how to handle a discussion like that. So like I said, she did a great job. For example, one of the stories, Unsettled, a participant there said that she found she didn't know what to do with all of the rage in that story. And the facilitator had a comment about how righteous anger is a catalyst for revolution, or something along those lines. And I offered my viewpoint that more important than anger is imagination. You need to imagine what's going to be next before that can come into being. And so that's why I think books like this are so important. Highly imaginative. And Magda might be right about anger. I might be right about imagination. Maybe for intractable problems like societal change, we have to just throw everything at it, anything we've got. But anyway, I came away from the discussion with lots to think about. And I like that. The next book that they've chosen for the Glass Bookshop is Otessa Moshfe's new book, Lapvona. And I have been planning to read that, but I don't know if I'm going to bump it up fast enough on my TBR to get it read by the end of July for the next meeting. We'll see. We'll see. Some of you might think, Lindy, you read so much, a book a day. Surely you could fit that in. But, you know, I have my priorities. So I haven't decided yet. All right, let's get into what I read in the past week. Well, starting with The Bale. No Stars in the Sky by Martha Batiz, who's a Mexican-Canadian writer. So this collection of stories I already talked about on my mid-year freakout video. I'll put a link down below if you didn't see that one. What a disappointment it is. So Penny is one of the other Shadow Gillers, and she recently read this and said she would be bitterly, bitterly disappointed if it doesn't make the Giller long list. So I was really excited to pick it up, and I did it as a buddy read with my friend Kathy, and after each story we would check in on Voxer. It's a good way to discuss short stories. And by the fifth story, neither of us were feeling very excited. One out of the 5 stories was good. Kathy bailed, and I read one more story, and then I bailed. So, sorry. But the thing is, as Kathy said, these stories made her feel really hard-hearted because they are about heartbreaking things. A son who commits suicide, a daughter who's murdered and disappeared, and the mother is searching for her. Some of them are set in Canada, some in Mexico, some in Argentina, and there are tragic situations, and yet neither Kathy nor I were feeling the emotion of it, hence the fear that we're getting hard-hearted. But the previous buddy read that Kathy and I did was the book Companion Piece by Ali Smith. I cried in that one. There was so much emotion. A scene that comes to mind from Companion Piece is when a woman's father is in the hospital with heart problems. It's at a point in the COVID pandemic where no one is allowed to be with patients who are in intensive care in the hospital. And so this woman she doesn't want to go home from the hospital. So she's in the parking lot, sitting on a guardrail, looking up at the windows of the building, thinking about her father inside. And there are other people sitting on the rail as well, looking at the hospital. And they're all in the same boat, caring about their loved ones that they can't be with. And I just got so emotional. I didn't feel it with Martha Batiz. So I gotta blame the writing. Yeah. If you've read No Stars in the Sky and you like this one, please tell me more about what I'm missing. Thanks. So, on to what I finished. Dandelion. So this one is by Jamie Chai-Yun Liew, who is a Chinese-Canadian writer. She is an immigration lawyer, and immigration is at the center of this story as well. In the first half of the book, it's a girl's childhood in a mining town in British Columbia. And when she's around 11 or 12, her mother leaves and they never find out what happened to her. The girl's parents emigrated from Brunei. They're of Chinese heritage. In Brunei, her father was stateless, so it wasn't until he came to Canada that he was able to get citizenship. In the second half of the book, the daughter has her first child, and that makes her think a lot about her mother and what happened to her, and decides to go looking for her. So that was Dandelion. This one is eligible for the Gilpeer Prize, and I would say that it has a long shot of making the long list. The writing is strong enough. It's an important story, and it's also emotionally moving, so we shall see. So this was for my feminist book club had picked this, and we were supposed to discuss it on Saturday, but one of our members asked if we could reschedule so that she could participate. It's pretty easy when we do things by Zoom, so we're going to be discussing this later this weekend on Sunday evening, and I look forward to that. And I also had Feminist Book Club on Monday night this past week, and Crip, Kinship, subtitled The Disability, Justice, and Art Activism of Sin's Invalid. And it's by Shayda Kafai. It's about a queer people of color performance project for disability justice. I'm going to include a link below if you want to find out more about Sin's Invalid. And as you can see, I had many tabs in here, lots of things to talk about. If this subject interests you, I do recommend Crip, Kinship. There was a point in this book where emotion really welled up in me, and that was when Shayda talked about her experience of attending an event that had a quiet room for people who needed that, and how grateful she was that she didn't have to justify what she needed. This group understands, and sometimes illness means that something is postponed or rescheduled or happens late, that people's lives come first and work comes second. And there's always learning happening. An example that they give in here is that people with autism found that their needs weren't being taken into consideration at some point. So they said, we're gonna do better and make sure that we have people with autism who are in the planning, so that that viewpoint is there. Which brings me to my next book. It's an audiobook, a memoir. I Have Been Buried Under Years of Dust. So it's a memoir of autism and hope, written by a mother and daughter team, Valerie Gilpeer and Emezi Grodin. And the audiobook is read by Sara Morsey. Now, Emily Grodin has autism, big autism, and was never able to communicate until she was about 25 years old, when she started being able to use assistive communication with a keyboard and an assistant helping her. Up until that point, it was a real struggle for her and for her parents. Her parents were both lawyers. Her mother had to sue the school district every single year in order for her daughter to attend school, and it's a part of the law in the US that children with disabilities have access to public education. Emily now is a poet. Once she started communicating, she has been using a full, rich vocabulary that shows that her time at school, she was absorbing things, even though not everybody realized that was what was happening. One of the things that really hit home in this memoir was when Valerie, the mother, talked about news stories where people with autism were being shot and sometimes killed by police officers. There was a couple examples of a person with autism who was suicidal. A friend called the police came and killed the woman, or in another case it was a young man. And so Valerie was just so afraid for her daughter and what would happen to her out in the world if she was having a meltdown. The great news is that now that Emily is able to communicate, it's a lot less likely that she will be so frustrated that she has a meltdown. The audiobook narration, I had a bit of a problem with because there's two voices and there wasn't much difference in the narration. Sometimes it was hard to tell when Sara Morsey switched between mother and daughter. So I would have preferred to have two different narrators for that, or to have an electronic voice, which is how Emily communicates via machine that translates her text to audio. And another audiobook that I listen to is called Index, A History of the. It is a bookish adventure from medieval manuscripts to the digital age. And it's by the scholar Dennis Duncan. Audiobook read by Neil Gardne. Does an excellent job. There's lots of humorous parts in it. If you are a book nerd, and you probably are if you watch BookTube, think about this. So much great stuff in here. I was reminded, what's the difference between an index and a concordance? Duncan talks about how there was a fear that indexes would be the entry point into a book, and lazy readers, instead of using the index to review stuff that they've already learned from reading the book, would just read the index and say, okay, I know everything in it now. He compares it to how much of our reading nowadays is through the results of a Google search. So the index contains the possibility of being our primary port of entry into a book. And he also talked about something that I'd heard about before, and that is the it narrative, which is something that was really popular in the 18th century. The example that Duncan gives is the adventures of a quire of paper, but he also talks about adventures of a banknote, adventures of a black coat, history and adventures of a lady's slippers and shoes. So these are all talking object narratives. If you have read any of these or other narratives, please let me know in the comments, because I'm very intrigued by these. Samuel Richardson comes up, the author of Clarissa and other novels, and he decided to index his fiction, and he had friends who said, don't spend all your time writing an index. It would be more valuable for you to write another novel. That's what we want. So the question came up then about what is the purpose of a novel? And Richardson was of the opinion that it was for moral instruction. That's why he wrote his books. And having an index would kind of be a way to minimize the distance between fiction and nonfiction, and treat his novels more as a kind of, just another kind of treatise, I guess. Yeah. So many interesting things in index. So if this intrigues you at all, give that one a try. I read a collection of poetry by a very interesting author, Akwaeke Emezi, a non-binary Nigerian writer. Content Warning Everything, which is also one of the titles of the poems in here. And as I was reading through it, I was thinking which would be a good section to read out loud. And the content warning is apt. I didn't want to upset anybody by reading out loud. Many of the poems draw on Catholic imagery. So for example, Mary, the mother of Jesus, comes up in many of the poems, and she calls her Mary Auntie. Mary Magdalene is also in here, and Jesus, the bastard son. They are poems about abuse and abusing and surviving. And if you like their style of writing, I think that this book is the kind of book you will like. You know, I found The Death of Vivek Oji too melodramatic. It interfered with my enjoyment of the novel. But melodrama in a poem, to me, is just fine. So, yeah, I got on well with Content Warning Everything. And another book of poetry that I read this week, Live Oak with Moss. It's a series, actually, of 12 poems by Walt Whitman. And Brian Selznick created a series of illustrations to capture the feeling of the poems. So the text of the poem is separate, and the images stand on their own. Selznick got the idea to do this project because Maurice Sendak, the British artist, had been invited to illustrate these same poems, and Sendak had turned down the project, saying that poetry needs to stand on its own. And if you've been watching my channel, you know that I have been experimenting with reading different, I would say, graphic novel adaptations of poetry. Some are successful, some I haven't found to be that good. I did like this one very much. I'll give you an idea of the art. Starts out with an oak tree. And Selznick also incorporated photographs from mid-19th century New York. The last 30 pages of this book are kind of literary criticism and biography of Walt Whitman. And it was kind of heavy going, but that's where all of my flags are, things that I wanted to return to. At the very end, there's the original manuscript pages. So you can see in Whitman's own handwriting, this is clearly about loving men, and Whitman never published them during his lifetime. Here's an example. And when I thought how my friend, my lover, was coming, then I was happy. Oh, then each breath tasted sweeter, and all that day my food nourished me more, and the beautiful day passed well, and the next came with equal joy, and with the next at evening came my friend. And that night, oh, you happy waters, I heard you beating the shores, but my heart beat happier than you, for he I love was returned and sleeping by my side. And that night in the stillness, his face was inclined toward me, while the moon's clear beams shone, and his arm lay lightly over my breast. And that night I was happy. I read this little itty-bitty graphic novel. It is an adaptation of a classic French short story by Marcel Ayme, The Man Who Walked Through Walls. So this adaptation was done by a lesbian cartoonist, Diane Obomsawin, who also goes by Obom, O-B-O-M. She is a French-Canadian and grew up in France, and she lives back in Canada now, I think. And the translation is by Helga Dasher. So, yeah, the story of a man who suddenly has the ability to walk through walls. Elizabeth of Bouquin and Books talked about Marcel Ayme being one of her favorite writers, so I especially want to bring this to her attention. It is put out by Conundrum Press. I don't know about the French version, but this English translation is Conundrum Press, which is from Wolfville, Nova Scotia. It's not in Goodreads, and normally when I read something that isn't included in the Goodreads database, I add it, but lately that little add button hasn't been there, so I don't know if Goodreads is just too busy right now or what. But last of all, my favorite book of the week, Scary Monsters by Michelle de Kretser. This is actually on the Miles Franklin shortlist that was just recently announced, and Michelle de Kretser has won the Miles Franklin twice before, I believe. I love her books. This is no exception. It's kind of different. It's actually two separate novels. You read to halfway through the book with one story, and then turn it around and read through the other way. As the Miles Miles Franklin judges say she's raging against racism, ageism, and misogyny. And I love books that dig into those big issues within fantastic storytelling, and that's what you get from this. I first heard about scary monsters from a column that Ali Smith wrote in The Guardian. Since reading this, I've been thinking about how Ali Smith wrote a novel that was in 2 parts, How to Be Both. And also, there's a Canadian writer, Anne Michaels, whose book, Fugitive Pieces, is kind of written that way as well. So it's not like it's never been done before. It is unusual. And it's also excellent. So that's it for me, for my Friday reads. Stick around for a few little videos at the end, and I will see you all next time. Bye, and thanks so much for watching. Coming in through the back gate, there are hops growing all over this archway. Crab apples are coming along. These grapevines, they're totally wild. I did cut them back a bunch since I got home just to be able to make it through this pathway here. We have had so much rain while I was gone, so Lori didn't have to water much. Actually, the only part that I water are the potted annual flowers. They're all looking very nice and healthy. And so are those puppies. Almost missed the irises. Their season is pretty short, but there's still a few left blooming. The daylilies are nearly finished. Well, this variety anyway. Oh, and my painted daisies. They're looking good. This particular plant is a total weirdo, and I love weirdos. But the reason I say that is because there are lots of mutation looking flowers that are kind of double. Like this one. Delphiniums are going to bloom soon. It's good to be home.